The New York Giants offense exploded for 37 points, but it just wasn't enough in a gut punch loss to the Dallas Cowboys. We're going to break it all down coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traynor, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants On SI, which is where you can find all of my written work. And as always, we welcome on in our Blue Crew community members, our everydayers, our newcomers, and everybody in between. And we thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Or if you've made us your first listen of the day, we appreciate that as well. Well, Giant fans, we came close. We came so close. I thought we were actually going to talk about a win today because the Giants offense exploded for 37 points, which should be enough to win a game. But the problem is the Cowboys, they hung in there. And at the end of the day, they beat the Giants by a score of 40-37 in overtime, no less. So we're going to take a look at what happened on offense. There was a lot of good, but there was some bad, very bad stuff. We're going to take a look at the defense, and then where do they go from here? This 0-2 team that played its heart out, but came up with nothing to show for it. So that's what we're going to talk about on today's episode. Again, welcome on in to everybody. Folks, the one thing that I know everybody's going to talk about, and I'm going to start off with it, 14 penalties in this game, 160 yards, 14 penalties, 160 yards. So basically, the Giants almost racked up as many yards. They were sent backwards like almost for 2 football fields. You are not going to win games if you continue to do that. Right now, some of the penalties were maybe ticky-tack, but you had some roughing calls. You had some false starts. The pre-snap penalties continue with this team. And you sit there and you say to yourself, they worked on it all summer long. They worked on it in the preseason. Why is it still happening? And I just don't have an answer for you on that. I don't think they have an answer for you on that. But it's sloppy football. And I think everybody who saw the game, or if you were following along, whether it be my coverage or whoever's coverage, 4 penalties on one drive, the opening drive by left tackle James Hudson III. 2 of which were false starts. The other 2 of which were aggressive penalties. All right. He was so bad that Brian Dable pulled him out of the game and he put Marcus Bowe in there and took his chances with a rookie who had primarily worked at right tackle for the duration of the summer. That's how bad it was. So, as far as I'm concerned on that, Andrew Thomas can't get back here into the lineup fast enough. And hopefully he will be in the lineup next week when they host the Kansas City Chiefs. But the penalties, and that was just part of it. Can we talk about the positive yardage that the Giants lost because of the penalties? In other words, the yards that they initially gained that got wiped out because the ball was moved back for the penalties. So they lost 213 yards on plays that were positive but were nullified because of penalties. That is over 2 football fields. So just think, if the Giants score 7 on that opening drive, instead of having to settle for 3, you think maybe that would have made a difference in this game? If the Giants scored 7 on their next drive where they had settled for a field goal, you think that would have made a difference? Sloppy football. which is a darn shame because Russell Wilson, quarterback, he had a good game for the most part, right? 30 of 41 for Russell Wilson, 450 yards. Anybody remember the last time the Giants quarterback did something like that? 3 touchdown passes, and then, of course, the one backbreaker, the interception, which I'll get to in a moment. But that said, despite the fact that the Giants had that from Russell Wilson, and despite the fact that they had 2 receivers in this game who had over 100 receiving yards, those being Malik Neighbors, who had 167 on 9 receptions, and Wan'Dale Robinson with 142 yards on 8 catches. Despite all that, Giants can get it done. And you know what? I'm going to point to another instance, another stat that just sticks out like a sore thumb with this offense. Red zone, or as I call it, dead zone. And I feel like I talked about this last week after the game. I'm going to talk about it again. The Giants were 1 of 5 in the red zone. You are not going to win football games if you are 1 of 5 in the red zone. They are now 1 of 7 through 2 games in the red zone. Is it any wonder that they are now 0-2, going into now probably a tough stretch of games, starting with an 0-2 Kansas City Chiefs team that's going to be looking to get right against the Giants on Sunday Night Football? That game, I fear it's going to be an ugly one. And then after that, they've got the Chargers coming in for a home game. Chargers should be able to handle them unless the Giants start cleaning up their act. But at this point, let's ask ourselves, all right? We're 2 games into the season now. Why do they still look sloppy in certain areas that can potentially hurt them and do hurt them? You would think that would have been cleaned up already, but yet it keeps going on and on and on to the point where an otherwise decent offensive showing just wasn't good enough. I mean, you score 37 points. That should be plenty to win a game. And I'll get to the defense because obviously the defense had their share in this. But 37 points should be more than enough. And it just wasn't. So the offense, for as good as Russell Wilson looked, just not enough. Now let's talk about that interception in overtime, which I think was the turning point of the game because it gave the Cowboys back the ball. They went 3 plays. Boom, Brandon Aubrey, their kicker with the bionic leg, makes the kick. Game over. That was the one play that you can honestly say was there was a miscommunication there. All right. After the game, Russell Wilson was asked about it by our pool reporter. And he said, without coming out and saying that it was Malik Neighbors' fault, he basically said there was a miscommunication on that play, that he has all the faith in the world in his guy, Malik Neighbors, which tells me that maybe Malik Neighbors was the one who ran the wrong route on that particular play. Because if you remember, if you saw it, Russell Wilson put the ball one place, Malik Neighbors wasn't within 5 yards of it. And when you see something like that, 9 times out of 10, the receiver is the one who screwed up. And it sounds like that's what happened on this particular play. So, the mistakes, the self-inflicted wounds continue for this Giants team, particularly on offense. And they're just they just can't seem to break this vicious cycle that they're in. And I just don't know what the answer is short of cleaning house at this point, because it's disappointing. 37 points and you can't win the game. And again, I'll get to the defense in a second, but I do want to mention one last thing on the offensive side before I get to the defense. And that's Jackson Dart. Brian Dable put Jackson Dart in there for, I think, 2 or 3 plays. And what was interesting about it is when Dart came in, now all of a sudden the Cowboys had to wonder, okay, should we account for this kid as a runner? Should we drop into pass coverage? What should we do? It worked, I think, for the first couple of plays. And then the third one, the Cowboys figured out that, Jackson Dart wasn't really going to do anything more than maybe toss, something to the flat or a short pass. But Jackson Dart's entry into the game prior to the Cam Scatterboot touchdown run, I firmly believe that helped set things up in a good way for the Giants. So that was a positive if you want to look for one. The running game this week, 84 yards, 21 carries, 4.0 average, one rushing touchdown. Cam Scatterboot was the rushing leader, 11 carries, 45 yards. He had the touchdown. Not bad, better than last week, but still not great. All right, coming up next, we are going to talk about the defense's hand in this latest loss. So do not go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans, this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right means cashing in. With football back, Prize Picks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes, all in less than 60 seconds. Download the Prize Pick app today and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. We're breaking down the latest loss for the New York Giants. They are 0-2 in the division. They are 0-2 in the standings. They've got the toughest part of their schedule coming up, starting next week. So will they avoid 0-4? I don't know. I'd like to think they would, but, just seems that no matter what, they can't get out of their own way. So now let's talk about the defense and their hand in this. All right. Now, the defense started off, I thought, halfway decent. But then as the game went on, I thought they got sloppy. There were missed tackles, poor angles, some of the coverages that were called. I was sitting there saying, why are guys so wide open? There were all kinds of issues, I thought, with the defense. But the biggest one that I was really concerned with was as the game went on, and granted, it was kind of warm in Dallas, okay? Let me just check the temperature. The temperature was 89 degrees outdoors. Yeah, 89 degrees outdoors, but the roof was closed, all right? Which meant that the air conditioning was on. So it was a climate-controlled environment. But yet, the Giants' defense, as the game went on, to me, they started to wear down, which raises the question for me about conditioning. How much conditioning, or how good was their conditioning that they couldn't go the distance? Because like I said, when you tend to get tired playing, a high-impact sport, or doing a high-impact activity, you start to get sloppy. And we saw that with the Giants defense, with the missed tackles, with guys not keeping up with guys, some of the mistakes that were made, with the defensive backs becoming grabby. They got sloppy. And some of the schemes that were called, yeah, they left me scratching my head too. Because I'm still not sure exactly what Shane Bowen is trying to do with this defense, right? The Cowboys, their rushing yardage total, 135 yards, 28 carries, 4.8 per carry, all right? Not good. Almost 5 yards per carry. So guess what? That meant a lot of short yardage situations. Okay, now let's talk about the tackles, all right? Of the 72 tackles made on defense, 36 of them were made by defensive backs, meaning a safety or a cornerback, meaning the third level. Why weren't more tackles made from the front seven? by the defensive line, by the linebackers, right? I know, at linebacker, Darius Muaso was hurt. He suffered a concussion. They brought Chris Board in. Chris Board got hurt, suffered a chest injury. They had to bring in Swayze Bozeman, who they had brought up from the practice squad. So they kind of went through linebackers there, but still, 36 out of 72 tackles made at the third level and beyond? Not good. You want to see your defensive front making the majority of the tackles. And the only Giant defender who was in the top 4 was Bobby Okereke. Okereke finished with 10 total tackles, which was third on the team, behind Paulson Adebo, who had 13, behind Drew Phillips, the slot cornerback, who had 11. And then after Okereke, Deontay Banks had 6. And he was tied with Javon Holland, safety, who had 6. All right. So the tackling, just not enough up front. And as far as receivers go, CeeDee Lamb had 9 receptions for 112 yards. He went up a lot against Drew Phillips. And that battle, I thought, in the beginning was more of a draw. They took one, they got one back. So that was a hard-fought battle. But the rest of the yardage, Jake Ferguson, the tight end, was second on the Cowboys with 78 receiving yards. Hi, that's the middle of the field. The linebackers, that's second level. What was going on there, George Pickens had 68 yards on 5 receptions and a touchdown. I think he beat, if I'm not mistaken, I think he beat Deontay Banks on a play. So just not a very good overall showing by the defense because they gave up 40 points. They got to do their part. And it's interesting because I think the lead in this game changed. Let me see. I think it changed 8 times, right? So there were 8 lead changes. Giants defense, just for whatever reason, you had 1 interception. All right. The interception was by Drew Phillips. Didn't get any return yardage. So yeah, they got the interceptions, but part of getting interceptions is flipping the field and picking up yardage and giving your offense a shorter field to work with. So the defense, to me, not a very good showing overall. I would say probably you could say Brian Burns had a good game. He had another sack. So he's got 3 on the year. Elijah Garcia had the other sack. And Kayvon Thibodeau had a sack. But other than that, I think the Giants had something like 8 quarterback hits. So they didn't really get after Dak Prescott. And Dak doesn't really run as much as he used to before his injuries. So just overall, the defensive showing, I would say that was probably more of the problem than the offense this week. And I just don't know where they go from here with that defense. Shane Bowen, nice man, but I continue to question if he's the right guy to be running this defense with some of the schemes he runs, with some of the calls that are made. Just, is he putting guys in the right position? The players will tell you, oh, we've got to execute. It's on us. We've got to execute. Well, you can't execute something if you're not equipped to handle it. If you put me in front of a piano and you say, execute, Beethoven's Fifth, I can't do it because that's not my strength. I don't know the piano, or I have a basic understanding of it. You put me on a guitar, I can do it. It's kind of the same thing with a coach, asking their players to do what they do best and to minimize what they don't. And I just don't know that the Giants do a good job of that. So that all being said, where do the Giants go from here? They're 0-2. They've got the toughest part of their schedule coming up. We'll talk about that right after this. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. We all turn to some funny places for advice. your barista, your barber, maybe even a random stranger in the bathroom. But not everyone is, quote unquote, the right one when it comes to real support. That's why BetterHelp is here. With over 30,000 licensed therapists and more than 10 years of experience, BetterHelp helps you find your right match, someone clinically trained and credentialed to guide you through life's challenges. BetterHelp is flexible. You can join the sessions online from home or on the go, which makes therapy fit into your busy schedule. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Find the one with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Hey, Giant fans, are you still paying full price for gas? Stop leaving money behind. Get real cash back every time you fill up with the free Upside app. You can make up to $300 a year just from buying the gas you already need. At first, I thought it was too good to be true, but it is totally legit. Real people are getting paid just to make their daily commutes, and you can too. Plus, you can cash out anytime to your bank account, to PayPal, or get an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Simply download the free Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and start earning cash at the pump today. Use our limited time promo code TOUCHDOWN and get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. Don't let this offer drive on by. Download the free Upside app and use our promo code TOUCHDOWN for the limited time 25 cents per gallon bonus. Offers vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. The Giants coming off a heartbreaker of a loss. I mean, a gut punch based on a walk-off field goal. So 40-37, just, every week it's something. And just when you think you've run out of ways to talk about a Giants loss, they challenge you to do it again. But anyway, the Giants are now 0-2, not just in the division, but in the standings. The season is kind of starting to slip away. They have two difficult opponents on deck. The Kansas City Chiefs, who, by the way, are also 0-2 after losing to the Eagles. And then after that, they have the Los Angeles Chargers, both home games. The Chiefs come in next Sunday for a primetime date. So here's the big question that the Giants are going to have to answer in the coming week. How do they keep from not letting this heartbreaker against Dallas affect them moving forward? Because look, the Giants, will say this about them. Everybody gave an effort. Everybody prepared. Everybody came, ready to play. Everybody gave it their all. And sometimes when you come this close to what you want, to your ultimate goal, and you don't get it, it can be very deflating, very demoralizing. So how are the Giants going to respond? Now, head coach Brian Daboll was asked about that, and he was basically, it's going to sting for the time being, but we shake it off tomorrow, we come back to work, and we get ready for the next one. Pretty much the same with a win. But here's where the difference is. If you're coming off a win, it's a lot easier to get ready for the next one. Your aches and pains aren't as, they don't hurt as much. Your heart's not aching because you know that you did your part, but somewhere along the line, things fell apart in the previous game. So, I don't know. To me, it's a losing battle. Can Daboll bring them up to speed, get them, to focus on the next one? I think, they'll focus, but at the back of your mind, you start to ask yourself, my gosh, I go through this week after week after week. I prepare. I take care of my body. I do this. I do that. And then I go out there, I get beat up physically, and I have nothing to show for it. At what point, especially the guys that have been with Dable now, since he came in here, at what point do they say, you know what? That's it. We can't keep going on like this. You'd like to think, hey, it's early in the season. It's only 2 games, but they were 2 big games. They're division games, which, as you know, in the tie-breaking procedure, they count for an extra half a game. So, not that I think the Giants have to worry about it given how they play, but that's something that, it's going to be, I'm going to be interested to see how they approach it. Now, I always make this comparison, but before I make it, I am in no way suggesting that the Giants are going to be Super Bowl bound. The only hope, I think, that if I'm Brian Dable and I'm trying to inspire the guys this week, if they're a little down, a little depressed, if I'm trying to inspire them, I call in somebody from the 2017. That team, for those of you who don't remember, started out 0-2. The defense was absolutely shredded. I think they gave up something like 80 points in the first 2 games. They were on the verge of losing their 3rd game against Washington that year. Then by the second half of that game, they put it together and they started winning. And of course, as you all know, they went to the Super Bowl and won the Super Bowl. I am not saying this year's team is going to do that, but the lesson about resiliency can be taken from that 2017 and applied in this situation, because you've got a lot of young players on this Giants team, guys who, maybe are like not used to losing, or they get frustrated, or they say, oh, you know what? Why am I even bothering? You don't want to see it. You'd like to think it's not going to happen because it is still early. But if I'm Dable, I ask maybe Eli to talk to them. Eli was part of that 2017. Or I don't know, maybe another player who might be around. See if they can come in and talk to them about resiliency, because that's what the Giants need to be moving forward. So how they handle the next game against Kansas City, do they come out fired up? Do they come out flat? Do they flop like a fish out of water? That's going to tell us a whole lot. And ultimately, folks, you could have the best schemes in the world. The execution's not there. If the mentality is not there, because you get frustrated as a player, it means nothing. And Dable, I said it last year, and he got the mulligan this year, but he better figure out a way to get through to these guys and not let them hang their heads and give up and start to go through the motions and mail things in. I don't think they will, because I think this team has pride, but you never know. You have to guard against that. So we'll see how he does with that, with the Giants. All right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. As always, thank you for spending time with us today, or if you made us your first listen of the day, we appreciate that as well. The NFL season is finally here, so for your next listen, get a double dose of Locked On NFL podcast. Tyler, the Madman, Rowland gives you a shot of espresso to start your football day, while my dude, Tony Wiggins, my brother from another mother, takes you into the barbershop for the smoothest breakdowns to end the day. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, Giant fans, I'll be back with an all-new episode tomorrow and every day this week here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you tomorrow.